let's delve into the nature of power a bit, and not as ability, but as when the postmodernists make the proclamation that everything's a power game, let's say, they're basically saying that power is the uniting meta-narrative or procedure or world. Now, we're trying to distinguish between, or partly what we're trying to do is distinguish between the world that's governed by power and the world that's governed by this other orientation that we're trying to flesh out. So let's see if we can characterize the world that's governed by power. Now, you said that you're subject on a fairly regular basis to like a tyrannical Freudian superego. Yeah. And that'll make itself manifest as a pathological conscience, yes. Right? As guilt when guilt is not warranted.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So now we know that for guilt to be an appropriate manifestation of conscience has to be properly oriented. But now we're left with the problem of how the hell, this is the problem of how you distinguish the spirits to see if they're of God, right? How do you distinguish, and I mean this personally to begin with, how do you distinguish between an impulse of your conscience that's a manifestation of the tyrannical superego and one that's orienting you towards a higher good? How can you tell the difference?
So good. So my response to the situation that you were describing with the architect, what I've learned to do is I ask the source of the normativity of the judgment that's being rendered against me. The voice is saying, whoa, that's not real. And I say, okay, tell me what real is then. Tell me what your standard of realness is. I get it to commit to a normativity. And then once it commits to a normativity, then I can bind it to what I was talking about earlier.
Okay, so let me ask you a clarifying question. Yes. Does that mean that conscience without call is unreliable? Like if I'm stopping you and calling you out on your misbehavior, let's say, but I'm not providing an alternative pathway forward, is that one of the markers of like tyrannical conscience?
I think so. I don't know if that's the point I was making.
Oh,
so,
okay.
No, let's not lose that point. It's a good point. So let's put a pin in that point. Yeah. The point I was trying to make is the pathological conscience isn't consistent about normativity. What it does is constantly invokes normativity that it refuses to submit itself to.
Okay, so it's not playing by its own rules.
It's not playing by its own rules. So I'll say,
is it incoherent?
It is, and this goes towards Whitehead's idea. I find that which in it which is ultimately self-destructive.
Think, by the way, the implications, that notion of it being incoherent. It does not cohere with you. Right? So
it might not even cohere internally.
Right.
Because one of the things, like, if your superego is the voice of a sadist, then it's going to say whatever it can say for the purposes of making you guilty or hurting in some way, right? It's not like that's orienting you towards something higher. It's a power maneuver. And sadism is a power maneuver, fundamentally.
It is. And so what I've learned to do is to challenge that and say, like in addition to whatever pain it might be inflicting, and pain can be borne if you understand it, right?
Yeah, it can be salutary as well if it's appropriate.
What conscience gets is the claim, often implicit, that there's an authority behind the pain. That the pain is based on, that the source of the pain has the right to inflict pain on you because it has an authority, because it's speaking according to some standard that you should be following. And what I try and do is get it to tell me what that standard is. And very often that I can then bind it to, wow, the thing you said, well, what's the point of this? Well, give me a clear example of something that has a point. Voice. Mm-hmm. If this is pointless, give me a clear example of something that has a point. Because if your point is that nothing has a point, you are engaged in self-destruction. Because there's no point in me paying attention to you either. So what is it you're saying? What is something that actually has a point, voice? And then if it's genuine conscience, if it's calling me to finite transcendence, it'll say, blah. And it'll call me to a virtue. If it's this pathological thing, it will start to thrash. It'll start to flounder because it will realize that
It doesn't have an up.
it doesn't have something that it can actually bind me to. It can inflict pain
That's
on
definitely the voice of a demon, right?
Yeah,
It's got no upward orientation.
definitely the voice
It's
of a
just trapped in hell. It's got no upward orientation.
So that's my personal answer to your question. But that therapeutic intervention, if I can call it that, is coupled to the philosophical reflection that finite transcendence is what I am most called to identify with. That is what I am. That is what my humanity is to hold together, reciprocally remember and recognize my finitude and my transcendence.